Special counsel report found Trump engaged in criminal effort to overturn 2020 election. Reuters, special counsel Jack Smith found President-elect Donald Trump engaged in an unprecedented criminal effort to overturn his 2020 election defeat, according to a report released by the Department of Justice on Tuesday. Smith, who resigned in the wake of Trump's election victory in November, also found charges could be justified against Trump's co-conspirators but reached no final conclusions, according to the report. Smith's report claims sufficient evidence to convict Trump in election interference case. Trump's re-election prevents case progression due to constitutional limitations on prosecuting sitting presidents. Judge Cannon denied Trump's attempt to block the 174-page report's release. Report provides fullest description of investigation leading to 2 federal indictments against Trump. 2-volume report, one on election interference released, another on classified documents still contested. Special counsel Jack Smith, whose office indicted President-elect Donald Trump on charges of illegally trying to stay in power after losing the 2020 election, said in a bombshell final report released early Tuesday that he believed his team had amassed enough evidence to convict Trump if the case went to trial. But Trump's election to a second term in November made it impossible for the case to go forward, Smith wrote in the report 174-page report, which was dated January 7 and addressed to Attorney General Merrick Garland. Smith also said his team considered bringing an even more serious criminal charge against Trump, a violation of the Insurrection Act, after concluding there were reasonable arguments that it might apply. The department's view that the Constitution prohibits the continued indictment and prosecution of a president is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the office stands fully behind, Smith wrote in the report. Indeed, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. The Insurrection Act provides that anyone who incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, could be fined, imprisoned for a maximum of 10 years, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States, according to the report. Trump and his legal team had fought to prevent the release of the report on various grounds, including saying it would interfere with his plans to take office on Jan. 20. But late Monday night, Judge Aileen Cannon in Florida denied Trump's emergency motion to prevent its release. Soon after, the Justice Department delivered it to Congress. The release of the report caps an extraordinary legal saga pitting the Justice Department and later the special counsel's office after Trump declared his candidacy against the former president. Investigators focused on charges that were arguably among the most serious ever levied against an elected official of Trump's stature, including whether he took steps to essentially try to subvert the will of the voters who elected President Joe Biden in 2020, not Trump. After Trump won the 2024 election last November, judges dismissed the charges in both cases at Smith's request, under long-standing Justice Department policy against prosecuting sitting presidents. Special counsels typically write reports explaining what their investigations revealed and the reasoning behind decisions about whether to bring charges. Trump responded to the report's release on Truth Social, attacking Smith and the congressional committee that investigated the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by a mob of Trump supporters. The fullest description yet of Trump's alleged 2020 election plot. Smith's report provides the fullest description yet about the investigation that led to 2 federal indictments against Trump before both cases were dismissed. Smith's team previously released a 165-page summary of the election case in October that included revelations such as Trump allegedly saying, "So what?" when Vice President Mike Pence had to be taken to a secure location during the Capitol attack on Jan. 6, 2021. Now Smith has written a final 2-volume report, including the newly released volume about how Trump allegedly conspired to overturn the 2020 election. The other volume, which is focused on the former president's alleged mishandling of classified documents after leaving the White House, has not been released publicly because Trump's co-defendants still face charges in that case. In appeals filing, Trump's lawyers described the report as nothing less than another attempted political hit job which sole purpose is to disrupt the presidential transition and undermine President Trump's exercise of executive power. Smith resigned from the Justice Department on Friday. Trump had said he would fire Smith upon assuming office and that Smith should be in jail. Smith makes case for prosecution, arguing Trump fueled January 6 violence. Smith argued in the report that it was important to bring the election interference prosecution against Trump in order to protect the United States electoral process. He alleged that Trump tried to obstruct the country's system for collecting, counting, and certifying the 2020 election results through fraud and deceit. Protecting the well-established American tradition of a peaceful transfer of power weighed in favor of prosecution, Smith wrote. Smith also defended the prosecution by arguing that Trump endangered the right to vote and have that vote counted. Trump, he said, urged state officials to disregard the true majority of votes in their states, pressured Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find more than 11,000 votes, and pushed then Vice President Mike Pence to throw out the electoral certificates that reflected millions of citizens' votes. An additional factor meriting Mr. Trump's prosecution therefore was the need to vindicate and protect the voting rights of these and all future voters, the report states. Trump also engaged in threats and encouraged violence against those he perceived as his opponents, according to the report, which noted that 140 law enforcement officers were assaulted on January 6, 2021, with some suffering significant physical injuries. Trump, Smith suggested, had fueled that violence by telling his supporters in a speech that day, ahead of the attack on the Capitol, to go there and fight like hell. The people who took Mr. Trump at his word formed a massive crowd that broke onto restricted Capitol grounds and into the building, violently attacking law enforcement officers protecting the Capitol and those inside, Smith wrote. What were the charges against Trump? Trump was indicted in Washington, D.C., for allegedly conspiring to overturn the 2020 election with baseless claims of widespread fraud. He was also charged with obstructing Congress from counting Electoral College votes on January 6, 2021, when a riot of his supporters at the Capitol temporarily halted the count. Trump contends report will perpetuate false and discredited accusations. Trump asked Garland not to release the report. His lawyers argued the dismissal of charges represented Trump's complete exoneration and that the report would perpetuate false and discredited accusations. Trump joined a court request by his co-defendants in the documents case, Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, to block its release. Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira argued Smith's work promises to be a one-sided, slanted report that has a single purpose, convincing the public that everyone Smith charged is guilty of the crimes charged. But Garland released the report in furtherance of the public interest regarding a significant matter, according to department lawyers who fought for its release: Brian Boynton, Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Mackenzie LaPointe, U.S. Attorney in Southern Florida, and Mark Freeman, a lawyer in the Civil Division. The report doesn't cover Trump's other federal case in Florida. Trump was charged with unlawfully retaining national defense documents after leaving the White House at the end of his first administration. FBI agents found more than 100 classified documents during a search of Mar-a-Lago in August 2022. Garland plans not to release Smith's volume on classified documents until the charges are resolved against Nauta and Oliveira. The second volume will be available for review by the top Republican and Democratic lawmakers on the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, government lawyers said. Vendettas. Smith, a former war crimes prosecutor, noted Trump's attacks on him and his team of prosecutors in a letter to Garland that accompanied the report, in which he disclosed that some of them had been threatened. The intense public scrutiny of our office, threats to their safety, and relentless unfounded attacks on their character and integrity did not deter them from fulfilling their oaths and professional obligations, Smith said of his team. These are intensely good people who did hard things well. I will not forget the sacrifices they made and the personal resilience they and their families have shown over the last 2 years. Smith, who insisted on having an extremely low profile throughout the course of the case, also vehemently denied Trump's claims that it was politicized. While I relied greatly on the counsel, judgment, and advice of our team, I want it to be clear that the ultimate decision to bring charges against Mr. Trump was mine. It is a decision I stand behind fully, Smith wrote in his letter to Garland. It is equally important for me to make clear that nobody within the Department of Justice ever sought to interfere with or improperly influence my prosecutorial decision-making, Smith wrote. And to all who know me well, the claim from Mr. Trump that my decisions as a prosecutor were influenced or directed by the Biden administration or other political actors is, in a word, laughable. The U.S. Justice Department on Tuesday released Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election, the last act of a prosecutor whose historic criminal cases were thwarted by Trump's November election victory. The report is expected to detail Smith's decision to bring a 4-count indictment against Trump, accusing the Republican president-elect of plotting to obstruct the collection and certification of votes following his 2020 defeat by Democratic President Joe Biden. A second section of the report details Smith's case accusing Trump of illegally retaining sensitive national security documents after leaving the White House in 2021. The Justice Department has committed not to make that portion public while legal proceedings continue against 2 Trump associates charged in the case. Smith, who left the Justice Department last week, dropped both cases against Trump after he won last year's election, citing a long-standing Justice Department policy against prosecuting a sitting president. Neither reached a trial. Trump pleaded not guilty to all charges. Trump and his 2 former co-defendants in the classified documents case sought to block the release of the report days before Trump is set to return to office on Jan. 20. Courts rebuffed their demands to prevent its publication altogether. U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon, who presided over the documents case, has ordered the Justice Department for now to halt plans to allow certain senior members of Congress to privately review the documents section of the report. It's unclear how much new information the public portion of the report will contain. Prosecutors gave a detailed view of their case against Trump in previous court filings. A congressional panel in 2022 published its own 700-page account of Trump's actions following the 2020 election. Both investigations concluded that Trump spread false claims of widespread voter fraud following the 2020 election, pressured state lawmakers not to certify the vote, and ultimately sought to use fraudulent groups of electors pledged to vote for Trump in states actually won by Biden in an attempt to stop Congress from certifying Biden's win. The effort culminated in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol when a mob of Trump supporters stormed Congress in a failed attempt to stop lawmakers from certifying the vote. Smith's case faced legal hurdles even before Trump's election win. It was paused for months while Trump pressed his claim that he could not be prosecuted for official actions taken as president. The U.S. Supreme Court's conservative majority largely sided with him, granting former presidents broad immunity from criminal prosecution. The Department of Justice early Tuesday released its long-awaited election interference report against President-elect Donald Trump after a protracted legal fight. Prosecutors dropped the 2 federal criminal cases against Trump after he won the 2024 election, and the final report by special counsel Jack Smith is their last chance to explain their decisions. Smith, in a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland prefacing the report, defended his work and his team, as well as his impartiality in pursuing the federal cases against Trump, whom prosecutors ended up charging with election interference in Washington, D.C., and with hoarding classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago resort and refusing to return them to the FBI. The report says the evidence would have led to Trump's conviction at trial, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency. Long-standing Justice Department policy prohibits prosecuting a sitting president. Smith said he fully stood behind the decision to bring the cases. To have done otherwise on the facts developed during our work would have been to shirk my duties as a prosecutor and a public servant. After nearly 30 years of public service, that is a choice I could not abide. The 137-page report lays out prosecutors' evidence of Trump's efforts to influence the election and propagate election claims he knew were false. Florida District Judge Aileen Cannon on Monday paved the way for the DOJ to release the first part of Smith's inquiry into Trump, covering the investigation and 4 felony charges against him tied to the 2020 presidential election. Cannon denied a motion by Trump's former co-defendants who sought to block the release. To avoid any risk of prejudice to defendants Nauta and Oliveira, the Attorney General has determined, at the recommendation of the special counsel, that he will not publicly release Volume 2 as long as defendants' criminal proceedings remain pending, DOJ lawyers wrote in the filing to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. But limited disclosure to certain lawmakers will further the public interest in keeping congressional leadership apprised of a significant matter within the department while safeguarding defendants' interests. Prosecutors dropped the 2 criminal cases against Trump after he won the 2024 election, and the final report by Smith may be the last chance for prosecutors to explain their decisions. Florida Judge Aileen Cannon on Tuesday temporarily blocked the Justice Department from releasing Smith's final report, pending an emergency motion from the appeals court to block the report's release. But the DOJ disagreed with that action, saying there was no need for the court to intervene, and also protesting the attempt to block the report's first volume on the election interference case. Defendants Nauta and Oliveira have no cognizable interest in that volume of the final report, the filing said. Cannon was appointed to the bench by Trump and had earlier this year dismissed the documents case. After Trump won the 2024 election, the Justice Department dropped him from its appeal. But it continued the appellate case for the other 2 defendants, who raised concern that they would be prejudiced if Smith's final report is published while they still face the threat of a trial.
By lies. Lies by the defendant, targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election.
If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content, and leave a comment below. See you next time.